I woke up to the sound of rain hammering the rusted sheet metal above my head. Cold air slipped in through the warped window frame, cutting straight to the bone. My breath hung in the air like pale smoke as I pushed aside the thin blanket, its edges stiff with age. The makeshift stove in the corner had long since gone cold, and the damp smell of the night still clung to everything inside. I reached for the half-empty plastic bottle beside my bed, splashed some water onto my face, and rubbed away the grit of another sleepless night. Breakfast was a stale crust of bread I'd saved from yesterday, and a few sips of lukewarm tea that had lost any hint of flavor hours ago. It didn't matter. I'd eaten worse, much worse. I pulled on my old windbreaker, its zipper stuck halfway up, and stepped outside. The muddy lot stretched toward the distant hum of Tacoma's industrial docks, where the air smelled faintly of salt and diesel. The clouds were low, heavy, pressing down on the city. My boots sank into the wet ground with each step as I made my way toward the waterfront dump. I had one prayer on my lips. Please, just let me find enough cardboard or bottles today. Enough for a piece of bread, maybe a hot cup of coffee if I was lucky. By the time I got there, the others were already picking through the piles. Alex Gizmo Morales was crouched near an old refrigerator, his fingers working like he was fixing something that would never work again. A couple of men I only knew by their street names, Crab and Sour, were tearing open bags without looking up. I greeted them softly. Good morning, Alex. Gentlemen. They barely nodded, trading glances as if I'd just spoken a foreign language. She's not like us, I overheard one of them mutter. Talks like she's still living in some rich neighborhood. What's she even doing here? I pretended not to hear. I'd learned that silence was safer than trying to explain. They called me schoolteacher because I wore glasses and spoke in full sentences. I didn't smoke, didn't drink, and I never begged on street corners. That alone made me an outsider even here, among people who'd lost everything. Truth be told, I didn't belong anywhere anymore. So I kept my eyes down, bent to my work, and let the rain run down the back of my neck. The morning wore on, the rain easing to a fine mist that clung to my hair and jacket. The dump was quieter now, just the steady rustle of plastic and the occasional clang of metal as someone overturned a bin. I worked my way deeper into the piles, past broken furniture and mountains of soaked cardboard. My fingers were numb, but I kept going. I'd learned to ignore the smell years ago, until a sharp, faint sound cut through the background noise. It was a high-pitched chirp, barely there, coming from somewhere behind a collapsed mound of bricks and splintered wood. For a second, my chest tightened. More than once, I'd found kittens tossed into bags, tied shut like garbage. People could be cruel in ways that never stopped surprising me. I'd seen those bags before. Sometimes we got there in time, sometimes we didn't. I set down my sack of bottles and picked my way over the debris. The sound came again, sharper this time. I pulled away a piece of sheetrock and my breath caught. No kittens, no living thing at all. Lying in the dirt was a smartphone, its screen dark except for the small icon of a nearly dead battery blinking in the corner. I glanced around quickly. Gizmo was still hunched over his scrap pile, and Crab and Sour were arguing about a torn jacket. No one had seen. Without thinking, I slipped the phone into my pocket, its weight oddly heavy against my hip, and went back to pretending to dig through trash for another half hour, just enough to keep anyone from wondering why I'd left so soon. When I finally walked away, the sack over my shoulder held enough bottles for a cup of tea and maybe a roll from the bakery on 6th. But I wasn't heading straight back to my shack. Instead, I turned toward the old heating tunnels near the freight yard, where Gizmo sometimes set up camp. "Afternoon, Alex," I called as I ducked inside. He looked up, his dark hair sticking up in every direction. "Think you could help me out? I found this, but the charger's missing." I held up the phone. His eyes narrowed for a second. He wasn't stupid. A phone like this didn't belong in my hands unless it was stolen or found. But he just shrugged. "Yeah, I've got something that'll work. You owe me, though." I emptied the coins from my pocket into his palm without arguing. A deal was a deal. As the phone began to take a slow charge, I headed back toward my shack, the thought of what might be on it pressing harder with every step. That night, I lit the stove and boiled the small pile of potatoes I'd found in a discarded crate. The phone sat on the crate I used as a table, screen glowing faintly. When the charging light finally turned green, I hesitated, my hand hovering over it. No passcode, no lock. The home screen was almost empty, no photos, no messages, just a few folders. I opened one at random, and that was when the air seemed to leave the room. There he was, Victor Ellison, my husband, the man I'd been told was dead, standing alive, healthy, smiling in a tuxedo beside a young woman in a wedding gown. And the date at the bottom of the screen was last month. I felt my knees weaken, the world tilting under me. My husband hadn't been murdered. He'd been living, celebrating, starting over, while I rotted away in prison for his death. And in that moment, the cold inside me turned into something else entirely. Before the streets, before the dump, before the smell of damp cardboard clung to my clothes, I was somebody. I was Martha Ellison, daughter of Raymond Ellison, the man who built Ellison Couture from a single tailor shop into one of Seattle's most sought-after fashion houses. My childhood was all glass and light. Weekend trips to the San Juan Islands, piano lessons in a sunlit room, private schools where every hallway smelled faintly of polished wood and perfume. My mother, Julia, was gentle but unyielding when it came to manners. My father was stricter still, insisting I work twice as hard as anyone else, because Ellison meant something, or it used to. When I left for university, there was never a thought of a dorm room. My parents bought me a small, airy condo downtown, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a balcony that overlooked Elliott Bay. I studied languages, dreaming of becoming an interpreter, someone who could move effortlessly between worlds. My father approved. He liked the idea of a career that was both sophisticated and profitable. Even then, I kept to myself. I didn't go to parties, didn't drink, didn't smoke. I wasn't shy exactly, just unwilling to waste time on things that felt empty. My glasses and my serious manner made me the quiet girl in every room. That never bothered me until Victor. We met at a fashion show in the city, one of those events where champagne flowed like water and every seat was occupied by someone in the business. I was there on behalf of my father's company, studying the latest designs, taking notes. Victor was introduced as a promising new designer, tall, well-dressed, the kind of smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. "Would you care to join me for dinner?" he'd asked, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I surprised myself by saying yes. That night, we ate oysters and pasta in a quiet corner of an Italian restaurant while a jazz trio played in the background. Victor listened, really listened, leaning forward as I spoke. He made me feel seen in a way no one had before. By the end of the night, when he kissed my hand and said, "I hope we meet again," I was already wondering how soon that could be. It didn't take long. Flowers began arriving at my office. Handwritten notes, each one a little more personal. By the third week, he sent a basket of deep red roses with a card. "To the most captivating woman in Seattle, Saturday at 8, same place." I didn't even hesitate. We fell fast. And when he proposed, down on one knee in front of a small crowd at the Space Needles restaurant, I said yes without a flicker of doubt. Victor took my name, something that felt like a romantic gesture at the time. "Ellison should live on," he told me. "Our children will carry it proudly." My parents adored him, or at least they pretended to. For a while, married life was every bit the dream I thought it would be. Candlelit dinners, weekend getaways to Vancouver, whispered "I love yous" in the dark. I believed in it. I believed in him. But fairy tales never last. It started small, so small I almost convinced myself I was imagining it. 2 years into our marriage, the house felt colder, not because of the weather, but because of the distance growing between us. We'd been trying for a child since our honeymoon, but month after month, nothing. At first, Victor brushed it off with a smile, telling me not to stress, that it would happen when it happened. But as the months turned into years, the smile faded. His mother, Helen, began making comments over Sunday dinners. Half jokes that cut sharper than any blade. I just hope I'm still around to see a grandchild, Victor. Some women have issues, you know. Victor never defended me. Sometimes he added to the sting, shrugging and saying, maybe she's just too focused on work. It was easier to bite my tongue than start another fight. Then there were the late nights, the smell of perfume that wasn't mine lingering on his shirt, the vague stories about meetings that ran over, or old friends he'd run into. I wanted to believe him, so I did until I couldn't. One evening, I asked him directly if there was someone else. He laughed, actually laughed, as if I'd told him a bad joke. You're imagining things, Martha. Your wound too tight. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening for the sound of his breathing beside me. I never heard it. The breaking point came a few weeks later. We were sitting in the living room with Helen, and the words just spilled out of me. If you don't love me anymore, Victor, then we should get divorced. I'm not going to live like this. Silence. His eyes narrowed. Helen's mouth tightened into a thin line. Martha, she said sweetly, Victor adores you. He's just under stress. This talk of divorce is rash. I turned to her, my voice sharper than I intended. Your son's been under stress for 2 years. He doesn't work, he drinks more than he should, and I'm tired of pretending otherwise. Victor didn't speak. He just watched me, and in his eyes I saw something I couldn't name then, but recognized now, calculation. 2 nights later, he came home early with flowers, my favorite wine, and a smile that felt rehearsed. I've been thinking, he said, we should start over. Just you and me. No more fighting. He opened a bottle of champagne, poured 2 glasses, and held one out to me. I remember the cool stem of the glass in my hand, the soft pop of bubbles against my tongue, and then nothing. Just darkness. When I woke, there was pounding on the front door. My head felt heavy, my limbs like sandbags. The voices outside were sharp, official. I stumbled to the door, pulling it open to find 2 police officers, a handful of neighbors, and Helen standing behind them, her face twisted in outrage. Mrs. Ellison, one officer said, we have reason to believe you may be involved in the death of your husband. May we come in? I laughed a raw, broken sound, because how could something so absurd be real? But they pushed past me, moving straight toward the bedroom. Helen's voice rose behind them. I told you she was unstable. Look at the blood. There was blood. On the sheets, on the carpet. A knife, wrapped in one of our bed linens, tucked into my dresser drawer. The room spun. I tried to speak, to explain, but the words tangled in my throat. Cold metal bit into my wrists. The last thing I saw as they led me away was Helen's satisfied smile. County jail was just the waiting room. The real punishment began the moment the gates clanged shut behind me at the women's correctional facility. The air inside was thick, stale, with a faint tang of bleach that never masked the scent of too many bodies in too small a space. My cell was a concrete box with 4 bunks, 3 women already sprawled on them, eyes flicking toward me like a pack sizing up fresh prey. I'd never lived with strangers before, never shared a bathroom, never heard the sound of keys jangling at every turn. In those first days, I barely spoke, barely ate. I lay on my side, facing the wall, holding myself together 1 breath at a time. It didn't take long for the taunts to start. Hey, school teacher, one woman called from across the cell. What's your story? Who'd you kill? When I didn't answer, the tone shifted, sharper, meaner. Too good to talk to us? Think you're better. One afternoon, a woman named Rena dropped down from the top bunk and came right at me, her shadow swallowing the light. Let's see how long you last in here, princess. Before she could lay a hand on me, a voice cut through the tension. Back off, Rena. It came from a tall, broad-shouldered woman in her 40s, with eyes that could stop you mid-breath. She's under my watch now. That was Donna Harris. Donna had been inside longer than most, long enough to know the rules that didn't make it into the handbook. She sat me down on my first real night there and spelled it out. You want to survive? You pick a reason to keep breathing. Could be revenge. Could be proving them wrong. But you pick it, and you hold on to it like it's the only thing you've got. And you never, never start snitching for favors. That's a death sentence in here. She taught me more than how to keep my head down. Donna had a kind of rough grace, a way of navigating the undercurrent of threats and alliances. She showed me how to stand my ground without starting a fight, how to make myself useful so I wasn't seen as dead weight. My hands found work at the sewing tables, hemming uniforms, repairing torn laundry bags. It was menial, but it was something I could control. Over time, the walls stopped feeling like they were closing in every hour of the day. I still woke in the night, heart racing, replaying that last evening with Victor. But instead of breaking me, those memories started to harden into something else. Not just grief, not just shame, resolve. I would survive this place. And one day, somehow, I would make them all answer for what they'd done to me. 6 years. That's how long it took for the sentence to end, though it felt like a lifetime had been carved out of me. When they finally handed back the few things I'd had the night I was arrested, a pair of earrings, my glasses, a jacket that no longer fit, I stepped outside the gates with no family waiting, no friends, no place to go. I took the bus back to Seattle, clutching the worn strap of my bag, my heart foolishly hoping I could at least see my home from the street. But when I reached the old address, there was no trace of my life left. A couple I'd never seen before opened the door. The woman held a coffee mug. The man barely looked at me. "You've got the wrong house," he said flatly, and when I tried to explain, he shut the door in my face. I begged them to let me take whatever might still be mine. A coat, a photo album, anything. They threatened to call the police if I didn't leave. The company was worse. Ellison Couture had been sold. New owners. New logo. The man in charge, some slick executive named Edward Harper, refused to see me. The security guard, someone who had once greeted me with a smile, looked right through me as if I'd never existed. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to step away from the building." I walked for hours that day until my feet ached, the drizzle soaking my hair flat against my head. By nightfall, I was just another figure under the overpass in Tacoma, wrapped in a blanket someone had left on a bench. I told myself it would only be temporary, a week, maybe 2, but weeks turned to months and months into a year. Then came the phone, the video, Victor alive, laughing, married to someone else. The fury that surged through me was like nothing I'd felt since the night I was arrested. It burned away the numbness I'd been living in, replaced by something sharp, dangerous. The next morning, I washed my hair in the sink at the shelter, pulled on the cleanest clothes I had, and walked straight to the police station. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my ears. At the front desk, a young officer barely glanced up as I explained why I was there. "So let me get this straight," he said, smirking. "Your dead husband's actually alive, and you've got proof on a phone you found? Lady, you expect me to believe that?" "I'm telling you the truth," I said, gripping the edge of the counter. "I was framed. I spent 6 years in prison for a murder that never happened." He leaned back in his chair. "Sounds like you just want a reward for turning in a phone." Tears burned my eyes, but I held my ground. I don't drink. I don't lie. And I'm not leaving until someone listens. That was when I heard a deeper voice behind me. "What's going on here?" I turned to see a tall man with close-cropped hair and a face marked by a thin scar running from his cheekbone to his jaw. His eyes were sharp but not unkind. The desk officer waved a hand. "She's spinning some story about her husband coming back from the dead." The man stepped closer, studying me like he could see past the dirt under my nails, past the fraying edges of my jacket. "Ma'am," he said, "come with me. Let's hear it all from the beginning." That was how I met Detective Stephen Carter. Stephen Carter wasn't the kind of man who wasted words. In his office, he closed the door, sat across from me, and said, "Start at the beginning. Don't leave anything out." I told him everything. My marriage to Victor, the night I blacked out, waking to police at my door, the trial, prison, the dump, and finally the video on the phone. When I was done, I slid the phone across his desk. It's all there, date stamp and everything. He watched the clip twice, his expression hardening. "You're saying you served 6 years for murdering this man," he said slowly, "and he's walking around free?" "Yes," I whispered, "and marrying someone else." Stephen leaned back, rubbing his jaw. "Leave the phone with me. I'll look into it. Where can I find you?" I hesitated, then gave him directions to the small shack I'd claimed near the industrial edge of Tacoma. He reached into his wallet and handed me a folded stack of bills. "Get something to eat, something warm, and stay put until you hear from me." For the first time in years, I felt the smallest flicker of hope. Within days, Stephen had pulled my old case file and seen what I'd never been allowed to see. Contradictions, missing reports, statements from neighbors who all told the exact same story in the exact same words, too perfect to be real. And not one scrap of direct evidence that Victor was dead. He dug into Victor's trail and found him in Portland, Oregon, living under the name Victor Roman, preparing to marry Madison Blake, an heiress whose father had left her a trust fund. The pattern was textbook. Charm the woman, marry her, drain her, disappear. Stephen didn't tell me the details until much later. At the time, all I knew was he showed up one morning and said, "I'm going to see him. Alone. Shouldn't you have backup?" I asked. He shook his head. "If I go in with a team, he'll bolt. I need him to talk, and I need it on record. If I call you afterward, it means I need my guys to move in." I didn't like it, but I could see his mind was made up. The next thing I heard was 2 days later, a call from a clerk at the precinct telling me Stephen was in the hospital. I didn't ask questions, I just went. When I found his room, he was propped up against a stack of pillows, a bandage wrapped around his head. He looked at me and smiled like it was nothing. "It's fine," he said. "He just got in a lucky swing before I put him down." I stared at him. What happened? Stephen's voice was calm, but there was steel under it. "Your ex-husband tried to buy me off. When that didn't work, he tried to kill me. That's all I needed to bring him in." In that moment, I realized 2 things. Victor's luck had finally run out, and Stephen Carter was the first person in years who'd stood between me and the darkness. The day of the confrontation, Stephen insisted we make one stop first. "If we're going to face him, you're not walking in there looking like he left you," he said. I didn't argue. He took me to a friend of his, a stylist the department used for undercover work. An hour later, the woman staring back at me in the mirror was almost unrecognizable. My hair was freshly cut and colored, my makeup subtle but sharp, my glasses replaced with a sleek, modern pair. Stephen grinned. "Perfect. Let's go ruin his day." Victor was already seated in the interrogation room when we arrived, his expression smug, like he was expecting to see the broken woman he'd left behind. But when I walked in, his smirk faltered. I sat down across from him and smiled, not warmly, but like I already knew the ending. "Hello, Victor," I said evenly. Or should I say Victor Roman? Or was it something else before that? I lose track of all your names. He leaned back, trying to recover. "I see prisons made you bitter." I tilted my head. "Prison made me patient. Now tell me, how exactly did my husband's blood end up all over my bedroom the night you disappeared? Or should I guess you bought off the lab too?" Something in his eyes shifted. Maybe he thought confession would make him look clever. Or maybe he just wanted me to know how thoroughly he'd played me. "You can't buy a real lab," he said with a shrug. So I cut my own hand with the same knife. A little blood goes a long way. And the champagne? Just one pill knocks you out for hours. By the time you woke up, it was all set. Everyone already believed you'd killed me. I felt my stomach turn, but I forced myself to keep my voice steady. And the infertility, That made him smile. A slow, venomous curve. Didn't want kids. Easy fix. Slipped something into your food over time. Cost a fortune, but it worked. Stephen's hand tightened on the edge of the table. That's enough, he said, voice low. You've just admitted to falsifying evidence, assault, and conspiracy to commit fraud. And we've got it all recorded. Victor's gaze darted to Stephen. We can work something out, name your price. Stephen stood. The only thing you're buying now is a cell. When it was over, Victor and Helen were both in custody, each facing the maximum sentence. The judge who'd presided over my trial was exposed for taking bribes and carried out of the courthouse on a stretcher after an apparent stroke. My record was cleared. Walking back into Ellison Couture as its rightful owner felt surreal. I didn't keep a single person from the old guard. Fresh start, new logo, new designs. But the best day wasn't the one I got my company back. It was the one I walked into the waterfront dump in a tailored coat and handed out food and warm clothes to the people who'd once let me search beside them without shoving me away. Some debts aren't paid in money. Stephen and I never talked about what we were to each other at first. He was busy helping me navigate the mess of paperwork, court hearings, and property transfers, and I was busy trying to remember how to live like a free woman. But somewhere between the late-night calls about legal filings and the quiet cups of coffee in his kitchen, I realized I trusted him completely. That was something I hadn't felt in a very long time. It was me who said it one night, sitting across from him on my newly reclaimed porch. I don't want to just survive anymore, Stephen. I want a life. He looked at me for a long moment, then simply said, Then let's build one. We were married, quietly, no grand gestures, just the two of us and a handful of people who'd earned the right to stand beside us. But something was missing. The house felt too quiet. It was my idea to adopt. There's space here, I told him. Enough love for more than just us. And I know you lost your little boy. Maybe we could give another child a home. He nodded without hesitation. We'll go tomorrow. That's how we met Lily. She was 3 years old, small for her age, sitting alone in the corner of a noisy playroom at the foster center. She didn't speak, not even when I knelt beside her and told her my name, but she slipped her tiny hand into mine, and that was enough. It took months of patience, surgery to fix the limp she'd been left with after an accident, and more bedtime stories than I can count before she spoke her first word to me. I'd been washing windows on a ladder when I lost my footing and twisted my ankle. She came running, eyes wide, and blurted, Mommy, are you okay? The word Mommy filled the room warm and bright. I forgot about the pain entirely. Not long after, life gave us one more miracle. I was pregnant. The doctors couldn't explain it, and I didn't ask them to. All I knew was that the family I thought I'd never have was suddenly real, breathing, laughing under my roof. These days, our evenings are spent in the park, watching Lily race toward the swings while Stephen holds my hand. Sometimes I catch him looking at me with that same steady gaze he had the first day we met, and I realize he saved me in more ways than one. Justice gave me back my name, my company, my home. But Stephen and Lily gave me something even greater. Proof that the life I'd lost wasn't gone forever. It was just waiting for me to fight my way back to it. And I did.